Salvete discipuli. This is Magister Muth back to continue our letter of Pliny, letter 616 on the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Today we're diving in to line 11, where we start with a nice linking verb, erat. There was. And now we're going to have a city's name with that genitive-looking ending. This is actually what we call the locative case, expressing location for cities or city-sized islands. So there was at Misenum, and that's actually our full first clause because we already hit that que, that and. And in fact, if we think back to the last letter, we were talking about Pliny, who's about to tell the historian Tacitus about his uncle. So that is our implied subject, the avunculus Pliny the Elder. He was at Misenum. And Misenum, that's a lovely seaside town on the north end of the Bay of Naples, a little further away from Mount Vesuvius. That's where Pliny the Elder had a house, where Pliny the Younger was living as a teenager. So he was at Misenum, and second action, regebat. He was ruling, or was in charge of, the classem. That's a fleet of ships. He was in charge of a fleet being praesens, describing our nominative subject, being present with imperio. This is with imperium, which is power, so it's a bit more of a technical term, having the command from the verb impero, imperare, to command. So he had the nominal command over the fleet in the Bay of Naples. At this point in Roman history, that was a very safe part of the empire, and Pliny wasn't really a military man, so this was more of a honor sinecure position that was given to this older scholar who had distinguished himself. So he wasn't really planning on doing any fighting as admiral of the Bay of Naples. Now we have a lovely thorny time expression, which we're not going to go into the details, but nonum, that means ninth. So this is short for the ninth day before the calends, which is the first day of September. Now the Romans count inclusively, so you'd start by counting the 1st of September and then go 8 more days back. So this turns out to be the 24th of August. According to Pliny's account, on the 24th of August, Fere, which is almost in the septima ora, the 7th hour, Roman daylight was divided into 12 hours, so 6 hours noon. This is a little afternoon. We get to Mater Mea, my mother. Remember, the Pliny the Younger, who was a teenager at the time, is talking about his own mother, uh, whose name was Plinia, I believe, and she is the sister of his uncle. So my mother indicates that we're going to have a lovely indirect statement. And she indicates that something apperere, something appears with a dative to her. And what is it that appears to her? We have our verb, now we need our subject of the indirect statement in the accusative case, nuben, that a cloud appears to her. And it is a cloud with two ets. We're going to have a both and. So with a inusitata, an unused to or unusual magnitudo, an unusual size, bigness, and species, late aspecto, an unusual appearance. Now, ille, that guy, who is Pliny the Elder, our avunculus, he, at that point, usus, having used. Notice that's a perfect participle from our deponent utor, to use, which goes with an ablative object. It's one of those handful of deponents, abbreviated puff-v, that take ablative objects. Potior, utor, frumor, fungor, and vescor, to feed on. So what has he used? Having used the sun. Basically, a little sunbathing. And soon, having used frigida, something feminine and ablative, which our commentary can help with us, that's cold aqua. Having used cold water, a cold bath, he gustaverat. He had tasted a little, he had snacked a little bit, while jacens, that's a present active participle, not from jakio to throw, we're going to see both of these coming up, but jakeo to lie down. So he ate a little bit lying down, as the Romans did, and he studebat, he was studying. So a perpetual scholar. He did write in a 37-book long encyclopedia after all. So that's what he had been up to, and what he was doing when his sister points out the cloud. At this point, poscit soleas, he demands sandals. And notice we're still in a very vivid, present, indicative narrative right here, even though it's clearly in the past. He's doing that for vividness. He asks for his sandals, he ascendit, he climbs the locum, the location. Which one? Now we have a relative clause from which ... to poterat. So the place from which he poterat, he, Pliny the Elder, was able, my mea culpa, it's actually not Pliny the Elder, because something is able, passive infinitive, to be seen, to be caught sight of. So in fact, it's from which illud miraculum, that miracle, that marvelous thing, was most greatly, Maximae, able to be seen. So he gets some high ground so he can check out this cool cloud. And we continue on. The cloud, we have a little parenthetical phrase here, incertum, and we're missing a linking verb. It should be incertum est. It is uncertain, maybe erat, it was uncertain for someone, for the people who are intuens, from in plus tueor, to look at. So from those looking at it, present active participle, from looking at it procul, from far away, it was uncertain to them ex quo monte, from which mountain. We can fill in the rest of the clause from which mountain the cloud was coming. That cloud, oriebator, it was rising, so we're not sure from which mountain, and in fact, cognitum est, it was known, postea afterwards, now a little indirect statement, it was known that fuisse, that it had been, a perfect infinitive, Vesuvium, that it had been Vesuvius. So at the time, you don't really know where it's coming from. It's probably obscuring the view. So a cloud was rising, and now we have quius, a relative pronoun in the genitive case, which we could translate as whose or of which. This is referring back to the nubes once again. A cloud whose similitudinem, whose likeness and formum and shape. Notice we're in the accusative. So why is it an object? Let's find our verb. Expresserit. That's going to be a perfect subjunctive. And it's a perfect subjunctive because this is a relative clause of characteristic. I'll talk about that in a minute, why it's not just an indicative verb. All right, so it's whose similarity and shape something expressed. And what expressed the shape of this cloud? The pinus, pine tree. And in fact, non alia arbor. So no other tree, magis, more greatly than a pine tree, expressed that cloud's shape. So a little tricky in English, but so a cloud was rising whose similarity and shape No other tree than the pine, more greatly expressed. Whew. So why are we in the subjunctive here? A relative clause of characteristic is a relative clause that instead of literally saying, what happened, like it was a cloud which we saw, it's talking about a type of thing. So it's a type of cloud which you might see, during a volcanic eruption. So we're not talking about a specific cloud, but a type of cloud. Uh, People who tie their shoes don't trip. Who tie their shoes, that's a general class of people. That would be more of a subjunctive idea. Just so we have a visual here, I want to show a quick picture from Steadman's commentary of the local pine trees in the Bay of Naples. You'll see them all over if you visit Rome. It's called an umbrella pine. So it does not look like a Christmas tree. It looks like this shape right here, which we should keep in mind as we continue the description. All right. Nom, for, now he's going to explain what he means by that comparison to the pine tree. For, and we're still talking about the cloud, the nubes as our subject. And nubes, we should remember, is feminine. So for, this cloud was a lata from a plus ferro ferre tuli latus, easy to miss those latuses, having been brought up. So the cloud raised up velut, as if in a longissimo trunco, with a really long trunk, just like we saw on that tree. The cloud diffundebatur, was being poured out or spread out with quibusdam ramis. Qui quae quod plus dam is kind of certain, or some. It's an indefinite pronoun. Here an adjective. So it was spread out into in certain branches, and as if it was lifted up in altum, into the high. We could consider that metonymy, saying the high place as in the sky. Altum also is often used for the deep, as in the ocean. So we saw that shape. It goes up high and then it spreads out like the branches of a pine tree. Credo. Now Pliny says, I believe because, quia here being because, now he's going to try to provide some scientific explanation for how this is happening. And we're going to jump to our feminine nominative participle, still describing cloud. I believe because it was a vecta, carried away or carried forth by a recenti spiritu. From spiro, to breathe, by a recent breath, basically a breath of hot air, lifting up the material into the sky. Dein, then, eo senescente. That's a nice ablative absolute. With it growing old. The cloud, once again, is destituta, was literally left behind. This is where we get destitute. So it was abandoned as the upward force is getting old. Aut etiam, or even victa, still describing the cloud, conquered by what? Pondere sua, by its own weight, like a preponderance, all the weight of the evidence. So once the cloud has been lifted up, left behind, and conquered by its weight, it vanescebat. It was vanishing into its latitudo, into its width. So here's the idea that you have some strong upward force that's moving the material up, then it kind of loses force and starts falling down, and that's what causes it to spread in different directions, which is actually a fairly scientifically accurate explanation for how mushroom clouds form very naturally from that upward force. Now, he's not quite done describing the cloud. He also has some more feminine adjectives for us. Interdum candida, interdum sordida. Sometimes candida, shining white, sometimes sordida, dirty and maculosa, spotted. Prout, just as if, sustulera. This is from tolo, the verb to lift up, which gives us that weird tuli form from Pharaoh. So as if it had lifted up what? Terram or kineram, earth or ash. Notice this way here is an or. Well, we're going to jump to our verb, visum. Visum means having been seen, and here it's going to be short for visum est. And we might remember that if video is to see something, the passive videor can mean to seem. If you are seen to be a certain way, you seem. So it seemed to as if to a eruditissimo viro, to a most erudite, most educated man, it seemed that it was magnum, a great thing, and something that noscendum esse. And perhaps this is an implied indirect statement. So it seemed that it was great and that a gerundive, it must be seen or learned about or known about. How? Closer. Propius, the comparative of prope, close. Therefore, you bet, he orders. What does he order? He orders a Liburnicum, that's a little ship, optari, passive infinitive, to be made apt, to be prepared or set up. And now let's look for, we have a couple more verbs here. So I see venire, velem, facit. And we have a condition here. So the C is going to go through velem as its verb. So facit is our main verb, and our subjects say he, she, or it. So once again, this is our uncle Pliny the Elder. He facit copiam. He makes plenty, or makes an opportunity here. He makes an opportunity mihi for me, Pliny the nephew. And what's the opportunity? Si velem. That's a subjunctive of volo. Notice the ego. If I wished, venire, to come una, together or as one. So his uncle invites him along. Hey, want to check out this cool cloud with me? And what does Pliny respond? I responded that, nice indirect statement, with an accusative subject, me, that I, male, that's from malo, which is to prefer, from magis volo, to want more. So I responded that I prefer studere, to study. Yep, classic teenager, doesn't want to go on the fun adventure, just wants to study. And forte, by chance, this word fortis is related to fortuna. By chance, ipse, he himself, dederat, had given something. And what did he give? We have our relative clause as an answer. He gave the thing which, the thing quod scriberem, which I was writing. So what does that mean? Pliny the Younger, he was doing his Latin homework. By some other accounts, reading some Livy that his uncle had assigned him as part of his education. So whether that's the real reason he wanted to stay behind or he just wanted, hang out and watch TikTok and play video games, we will never know. Either way, Pliny the Elder leaves alone. After that, Pliny the Elder by himself egrediebatur. He was going out, from our deponent gradior, to step or go. And he was going out with an ablative of separation, domo, from the house. Notice that imperfect tense. He was going out from the house when, jumping to the present tense, accipit. He receives codikilos, some little codexes, or maybe a little note, a note of rectina, a woman, rectina of Tascus, so that's saying wife of Tascus. We've got a supply and uxoris in there. And rectina is exteritai, terrified. Terrified by what? Periculo imminente, a danger that is imminent or threatening, a present participle. Why was she terrified? For villa eius, the house of her house, sub iacebat, was lying under or lying at the base. And here we're implying it's lying at the base of Mount Vesuvius. And not neck. Neck ulla fuga. There was not any fuga, no flight from fugio. Yeah, we gotta put in an S again. There's no flight nisi navibus, except by ships. So one of the downsides of having a gorgeous seaside villa is I guess you need to escape a natural disaster by boat. Poor Rectina. Rectina, she orabat, she was asking ut. Notice we have an ut after a verb of asking or begging, so that's going to be an indirect command. She was beseeching that a riperet, that he should snatch away. So notice orabat, that's she, rectina. A riperet is he, Pliny the Elder, that he should snatch herself away. That's say going back to the ultimate subject of orabat, snatch her away from an ablative of separation, tanto discrimini, from so great a crisis. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon. Walete.